Coming to you from the Black Swan Media Studios, this is Fireside Chats, talking to the real difference makers in the world. Now, here is your host, John Crump.
One more day until the weekend. Tonight we are sponsored by Black Swan Tactical, where I sell my t-shirts and everything else. We got these cool little patches in, and Eric, I'll make sure you get some of these. This says no quarter for tyrants. We also have them in hoodies, t-shirts, stickers, everywhere. They're very, very popular. These have been selling like hotcakes ever since all the Virginia stuff has been happening. People in Virginia are just buying these by truckload.
Virginia's getting hot, man, for sure.
Yeah, it is definitely. I see John Voorhees out there already, and there's some other people out in the YouTube chat room. We are on YouTube, D Live, Facebook, multiple Facebook groups, everywhere else. And if you want to donate to me and help me do this show, you can always go to patreon.com/John Crump. Do a one-time donation at paypal.me/JohnTC, or you can go ahead over to the Black Swan Tactical store and buy a t-shirt, patch, or whatnot. And you need an upper. Okay. I don't. For some reason, all the chats aren't coming through, and someone's talking about an upper. But I'll try to keep on monitoring different chats and everything else like that. Tonight, I am joined by a friend of mine who I met through another friend named Steve, and I recommended you for a TV show. I don't know if anything ever happened about that. But yeah, his name is Eric Dorenbush. He is the founder of Green Eye Tactical, and he was a member of a army unit. They're nothing too special. Kind of basic, entry level. They made a Chuck Norris movie about it called Delta Force, and the first question I have about the whole entire thing with what is it, ODA Detachment Delta. I know you don't like saying the name. You call it the unit, I believe, usually.
Yeah, it's one of those weird things, man, where a lot of us really aren't comfortable with saying the D word, and it's just one of those things that we're not used to saying. But the interesting thing is, like on the unclassified records or DD-214s or our NCOERs, it says that bigger than crap, right on it. But we still just don't like saying it. Special missions unit, the unit, whatever. Just don't talk about it too much.
It definitely exists. Well, it says on the DD-214. Oh, just don't pay attention to that.
Yeah.
One of the questions I've always wanted to ask you and never had a chance to ask you is, do you get those cool little motorcycles with the rocket launchers like in the movie?
They look pretty cool, man.
You know what I'm talking about, the Chuck Norris movie?
Oh yeah. Well, I thought you were talking towards what's that other kind of movie, Alpha Force or whatever? It was back in the 70s or whatnot. Megaforce. Yeah, I think they had the cooler motorcycles and vehicles in that one.
I gotta check that out. I've never seen that. Yeah. I just want to jump into some questions really quick. I know people are going to want to have questions about your background, but I wanted to get into something very, very recent that you posted that was kind of controversial. I don't think it's controversial.
Yeah.
Because I happen to agree with you on it. It was the UPS shooting where the cops, I think, didn't really do their job. I don't know what happened. But for people that don't know, there was a UPS truck that was hijacked, and the UPS driver was killed. The two robbers were killed, and a civilian was killed. And if you look at the breakdown, the way the cops approached it, I think was reckless, and I think it might show a lack of training.
Yeah, I mean, it's multiple problems, and there's a broader picture to that. Apparently, it was two guys robbing a jewelry store. They killed an old woman, there. So it was a felony pursuit, but they kind of pressed the engagement, and without getting into the tactics of it, there's been overwhelmingly, and this isn't the first time I've made a post like this, more than happy to, pat guys on the back when they do a good job. I think the last LE post I did was that cop who took that about an 85-yard shot across moving traffic and dropped a guy in 2 rounds, surgical precision of marksmanship, and gave him kudos for that. But I've made critical posts before. This just kind of brought a lot of things together, and I was horrified when I watched it to begin with. But barring the tactics, I think we can agree that the marksmanship was just lacking for this entire thing. There's bullet holes all the way up and down the UPS truck. A lot of those shots were taken inside of 25 yards, and wound up shooting the hostage, or hostages died. Granted, the autopsies still aren't out yet, but looks pretty obvious what happened there. And then a bystander was shot too. And that kind of stuff kind of makes my blood boil a little bit, because as citizens, that wouldn't be okay with us. And we all train to be accountable for every single round that we fire. We kind of drill in the 4 firearm safety rules into us. And one of them is know what's in front of that and beyond your target. It's there were some issues with it, for sure. I guess John's getting some connection issues. If you guys are watching, if you click over to the Green Eye Tactical Facebook page, you'll kind of see my open rant on it. Of course, the second part was the comment by the police chief with that as well.
My computer crashed.
Oh, if you had a Mac, that wouldn't be a problem.
1 second.
No worries, man. No worries.
And I can't even hear anything on this one, so.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Give me.
While you guys are fixing that, there's some guys commenting about the tactics on it. One thing that I won't get into on the internet is tactics. That's one thing I kind of shy away from. Not that I don't think it's worth discussing. It's just that I've kind of developed a position in recent years that I stay away from discussing tactics in open forums like this. A lot of times you get lulled into a false sense of security, thinking we're just talking amongst friends, but that's not how the internet works. And anyone could be watching something like this, whether they're criminals overseas or something like that. So I kind of, when it comes to tactics, that's why I don't really discuss that too much on the internet, but I do it quite a bit in courses, obviously.
Yeah, one of the cool things about you, which I think is really awesome, is that you don't offer any training to like law enforcement or military that you don't offer to civilians.
No, and that's not to say that I haven't done training for law enforcement that I have not done for civilians, but it's mainly either because of a price point or availability of equipment. Like I got a lot of civilian clients that want to do some breaching classes, do some mechanical breaching, but doors are expensive. If you want to do realistic training, you got to get real doors. So, things like that can kind of hold up. But you either believe in the Constitution or you don't, and training's part of the well-regulated part.
Yeah, that's another cool thing that I think we see eye to eye on is how we view the Constitution, which brings me to what's going on in Virginia.
Mm-hmm.
In Virginia, we were talking about it earlier, how the governor said that he was going to bring in, not the governor, a congressman said that he was going to bring in the National Guard if the sheriff didn't enforce the gun laws, which I think is insane, because the guy who actually said that is also a big proponent of immigration sanctuaries. So how can you say that? What do you think that the guys in the National Guard would do if they were ordered to go in and arrest people?
Man, you don't know till you know. You know, I know a lot of veterans, you know, that are kind of those, you know, I believe in the Constitution, but, you know, kind of crowd.
Yeah, the buttheads, as I call them.
I don't know. You know, you'd like to think that, especially National Guardsmen, you know, wouldn't be cool with that. You know, but I think we're going to find out. I think, you know, there's been no attempt at real de-escalation from either side of the argument. And I kind of find that alarming from both standpoints, because it's almost like you got the gun control guys who are itching for a fight. You know, you've got the gun owners that are itching for a fight. And I think a lot of people don't really realize what that's going to look like, or what it's going to be like, you know, and it's not going to be like Call of Duty or the movies or something really cool, you know.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's made out to be. Like, oh, yeah, it's going to be a fun time. Okay.
Yeah, I was talking to someone else today, and basically I said, you need to exhaust every possibility before you go to that extreme.
Well, and that's why I like the local resistance, you know, with these counties, you know, declaring sanctuary cities. You know, I'd like to see a little bit better participation in local votes and turnouts and referendums. Hey, recall elections, you know, like Colorado did when they passed their magazine ban, when they pulled back, 3 or 4 of their elected officials right after that happened. Yeah, I mean, hey, get out and vote. I mean, that it does work. People just focus on the wrong vote.
Yeah. For some reason, not all the comments are showing up, but yeah, we'll roll with it.
I see a lot of them on the YouTube, if that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, YouTube, but I also have a side scroll, because we're on 9 different platforms.
Oh, right on, right on.
And it's kind of hard to click through all of them, so I'm just gonna click with the YouTube.
I just saw here the live comments on this this thing. Okay.
Oh yeah. Right if you look at the actual YouTube page, there's a hell of a lot more comments than what we see right here for some reason.
Right on.
Green Eye Tactical is located in Texas. Someone wants to know.
Yeah, I travel to teach, but a lot of the open enrollment courses that I just kind of list out, you know, to just let whoever sign up for. They're at a range that's kind of close-ish to me, which if you're in the Texas area, it's a real nice range. It's called Triple C Tactical. It's right in Crescent. Real great facility. If you like long-distance shooting, there's all kinds of long-distance bays. They've got series, I think, like 12 lanes that have steel every 100 yards out to like 900. So you can just back your truck up, throw your rifle down, and you're shooting. They shoot out past 2,000 yards there. Lots of pistol bays, and they do lots of 3-gun competitions and whatnot. I'm actually teaching CQB out there this weekend. I leave tomorrow to go set up.
Yeah. Let's get into your background a little bit. When you joined the Army, you didn't go directly into the D word, Delta. What did you go into?
No, man. Actually, I joined the National Guard out of high school. I was 11 Charlie in the Guard. I was around 94. So,
and what's 11 Charlie for people that don't know out there?
Mortarman. So the summer in between my junior and senior year of high school, I did infantry basic down at Sand Hill, and then had a failed attempt at college. Pledged a fraternity my first semester, and majored in drinking, and then just went active duty, and went to the 82nd. That's not that uncommon comparatively. It's not that common, but there's lots of guys that come over from the 82nd as well.
Yeah. Is it true that most of the people come from like the Ranger Regiment?
Rangers and special forces, but I think that's more due to the adage of the one of the biggest reasons people don't make it into anything is because they don't try. So there's a thing with exposure, so SF and Rangers would get exposed more to special operations. So, that kind of gets demystified a little bit. Whereas, regular guy like 82nd, you know nothing about it. At least when I started, that kind of changed a little bit as operations went on. But yeah, I mean, you just that kind of fear of the unknown, I guess.
Yeah, what made you decide you wanted to go out for that unit?
Man, I don't even know. I didn't know what what that unit was when I tried out for it. I was just wanted to do something, and I was kind of coming on the heels. I did Best Ranger in 2000, so I was in pretty good shape, back then, and yeah, just
Yeah, I mean,
mainly because people said, yeah, you're not going to make it or you couldn't do it, so try it.
yeah, but I mean, I just can't imagine waking up one day and be like, "Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna try out for the hardest military unit in the world
Yeah.
and go for it." I know that a lot of the training is kind of secretive of the selection period.
Mhm.
I did hear it is a lot of marching through the mountains where or navigate.
It's land nav, so it's not the actual selection course is in the Army ATAR system is the Advanced Land Navigation course. It's actually an official, Army course. So it's actually designed to teach you land navigation and then evaluate you. So yeah, you're gonna be walking, land navigation quite a bit.
Yeah, I read a book about the selection period, and the guy was that wrote it. I can't remember what the book is. He said one of the hardest things was not when he went through it at least is not knowing when it was over. He
Yeah,
would have
that gets
hard.
some guys. Yeah, I mean, you for sure don't know if it's going to be your last point, or how many more you got left. For me, like I always liked land navigation. I liked rucking. And for me at the time, it was better being in the 82nd. I just didn't want to go back to the 82nd, so I was fine with that. Just like whatever. You know.
Now, how long were you in for?
Uh Man, I'd have to do math. I think just shy of 15 or 16. I don't know. You have to look at my LinkedIn profile. One of the things I fail at are names and dates. I consistently forget my own birthday every year, you know, much less everybody else's. So I don't really pay too much attention to it.
Yeah. What was your biggest challenge
Hmm?
that you faced?
Ooh, uh,
Tricky question. There's probably tons
yeah. I
of.
mean, yeah, there's probably tons of different aspects to it. I guess once you get into special operations, it's just being disciplined enough to stay up with your own individual skills because if there nobody's going to hold your hand. You've got to handle everything on your own. If you don't, cut the mustard, then you're out. So
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely something that that I would think about.
Mhm.
There's just so much information out there about the whole Delta Force thing, and a lot of it is BS, and a lot of it is true. Being from a civilian standpoint, I I don't know like what's true and what is BS. Um, so, which brings me to my question that I have for you is, what is the biggest misconception about Delta?
uh trying to figure out how to answer that because there's a lot of stuff that I don't talk about, but probably
Yeah,
probably perceptions. Exactly what the unit does because everybody sees big green machine, kicking in doors and all that stuff, and that's just only a small part of what happens over there.
yeah. I know when I was with the State Department, I know a lot of the DS guys were actually Delta.
Yeah, I'm not going to really get into, like other mission sets and, stuff like that, or what guys are tasked with, or doing.
Well, let's just say that Delta is just not that.
Mhm.
They do multiple different things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's fair to say. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very interesting. What made you want to get out, though?
What's that?
What made you want to get out?
Oh man, there's a lot of reasons really. There was quite a few guys that got out right about the same time I did too. That was right after the transition of authority. There was some changes into the mission set, and like warrant-based target prosecution was a big thing. Wanted us to hand over our whole intel packet over to an Iraqi judge. That was a big Obama deal.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Taking away reenlistment bonuses and things like that. And I had a big contract fall in my lap as well, to go over the UAE and, teach over there. So, yeah.
So you went and taught over the UAE?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of those things. If I had to do it again, I probably wouldn't. But the pay was good, and it got me thinking more about instruction. Because over there, kind of like if you take a professional athlete, a football player or whatnot, he doesn't really have to know and break down to somebody else what he does, right? He just has to figure out what works for him, but not necessarily understand the why or how to teach that to somebody else. So that wasn't really an aspect that I thought a whole lot about, but when you're teaching, a bunch of Arab teenagers, how to do things through a translator, you've got to kind of quickly learn how to break that stuff down, to a Barney level and figure it out. So it got me to rethink a lot of things, and kind of got me geared more towards an instructor or a coach,
Matt Death Cowboy wants to know what was your best experience that you got out of it.
Man, that's a tough one. Be just experience. There's a lot of experiences. I guess I don't know if I could pin a best one, a best experience to it, but just a wide range of broad experiences that kind of broaden your perspective into warfare, yourself, training, tactics, just kind of the whole package, I think.
Yeah, one of the things that I always noticed about people that come from the special operations community, on a whole, most of them are the most chill people that you can meet. They're not like amped up like you see in the movies, like a Charlie Sheen guy jumping off the bridge.
Well, especially from my side of the house in special operations, most people have a pretty humble attitude because nobody's ever really the best over there. You don't get people talking like that because you're always just one day away from slacking and someone else being better than you in something. It's an extremely competitive environment.
I gotcha. Chris Shoemake wants to know what is your preference on a weapon setup?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question. And a lot of people. Go ahead.
I also wanted to bring that up because we actually had a discussion about sighting in red dots before.
Oh yeah. That's another hornet's nest I kicked over. But
I wanted to bring that as well.
A lot of people look at weapon setups like, how would you set up your weapon? Well, there's a lot of unanswered questions in that question because weapons are tools. It depends on what you're doing, what your application is. I can't say, this optic, this rifle, this barrel length, these accoutrements on it would be best, if that kind of makes sense. I have a preferred default, but, I might run different optics or different setups based off of different applications, if that kind of makes sense. And I see, John Voorhees here followed that up. What was your weapon and sidearm? I had a lot of weapons. had a whole locker full of weapons there in my team room that I could select from. So it depends on what your application is. Oftentimes my default is what I'm running now. Granted is a 416. Before that it was custom Colt M4. And then I always had a riser on my optic to get it up higher. That had applications for CQB, night vision use, gas mask usage, and EOTech and a 3x, on it. Back then I was running Atpel. I think they call them the 13s. We didn't really follow the Army nomenclature too much on. We just called them Atpels. Yeah, I mean that's about it. Throw a light on it, call it good, and everything else is just preference.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you about you kicked up a hornet's nest when you were talking about the sighting and a rifle. Let's go ahead and talk about that.
Well, really, the very first hornet's nest I kicked up in the industry was because I banned an optic in one of my courses, and that was the Aimpoint T1, and it was because of observed POI shift in courses. And industry went kind of nuts over that and said a bunch of mean and hurtful things, as they do. And so I kind of took it upon myself to do a big test on it, a big study on them with red dot parallax, and didn't derive any conclusions. It's still there. Like if you Google Green Eye Tactical Parallax Test or look on the website, it's there. It's an 84-page report.
It's great. Great. I read the whole thing.
There's an interactive website too where you can play around with the data. But kind of dispelled. I actually learned a lot from it too because it dispelled some myths that I thought was true. Like red dots or parallax free past a certain distance or more susceptible inside of, and found out all of them are different. And in fact, you could have 5 optics of the exact same model and they'll all be different.
One of the things I discovered by doing a lot of testing is parallax free is more of a industry term. It's more of a marketing term.
Yes, marketing term. And there's a part in that report where, I quote every single manufacturer's, stated claims on parallax, and every single one of them, other than EOTech, overstated it, and EOTech. They understated it, and EOTech overstated it. So all of them, declared parallax free, or parallax free past a certain distance, which, we compared their claims versus the observed results, and then EOTech had a much higher parallax claim, but it was coming on the heels of that lawsuit. So it was probably lawyers getting involved and making sure they made a statement broad enough that they wouldn't get sued again. But yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, someone's actually bringing up the temperature change, but
so that thermal drift thing, man, all optics, if you actually look at what thermal drift is, all optics are susceptible to it. I think it gets confused in some ways because true thermal drift, when we talk about scientific thermal drift, you're really talking about changes in how lasers perform under different power supply. I don't know if amplitude's the right word, but different power supply with different temperatures. So that's an actual scientific effect. But I think you also have other phenomena that happen with optics because you have a number of different materials in optics, and when you expose them to different temperatures, they're going to expand and contract and act differently, not non-uniform, because they're all different compositions inside of them, and react to that. Nobody's done a real big test on it, and there wasn't a test done with the safety of use memorandum that Crane put out. Unfortunately, I actually contacted a buddy that was right down the road from the actual lab that the Army has up in Aberdeen, which is the only temperature and pressure chamber that's designed for testing optics. And they hadn't even looked at it. So
Aberdeen, Texas.
No, that's
or is that Maryland?
Yeah, I think it's up in Maryland. I can't remember.
Ground in Maryland, Aberdeen. So I wanted to see if you were talking about Aberdeen, Texas. So it is the the Navy testing ground in Aberdeen?
No, it's the Army.
Army testing ground.
Aberdeen
Okay.
Proving Grounds, I believe it is. I'd have to ping my buddy.
Okay.
He was up at Big Army headquarters when that went down. I pinged him.
Yeah. Here's another question about. Well, let's get out Nick's question before I forget. He wants to know what. I know you're probably going to say you don't want to talk, give an opinion on this, but I'll ask anyway. What's your thoughts on Navy Special Warfare?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really want to talk about other services. They're great Americans that are putting their lives on the line and serving the country. Or could there be some cultural problems? Maybe. I mean, I think there's enough information out there, public now, for people to kind of make their own decisions about it. But they're Americans out there serving their country, doing the best they can, and I think people are going to have to make up their own minds on what's out there.
Yeah. Chris Shoemake, before I get to that, Chris Shoemake is saying that newer digital optics have zero parallax. Do you have an opinion on that, or do you think?
Well, if he's talking about a digital optic, I'm assuming he's talking about some sort of digital video site, like some of the thermals are out there. Is that what he's talking about?
I don't know, because he's also bringing up about running a thermal full time.
Yeah, that may be. I mean, you're essentially looking at what that optic's looking at. It doesn't have the ability to skew. So, but parallax is something that's always there with everything. I mean, parallax is defined as the apparent shift in an object when viewed upon two planes. So if you have the capability of viewing the target and the site with any eye deviation that it's going to affect the field of view, you can have parallax. And it could be through lens refraction. It could be from a shift in the dot. It could be the whole scene shift, like you see with some of the MROs. It just depends. I may not be familiar with what he's talking about. Yeah, with a thermal sight, that's a camera. You're looking through a camera. Would I run that full time on a DMR? Hey, man, I mean, if you're hog hunting, thermals are great, for that. For a combat rifle, no, I wouldn't run a thermal on it. Some of our snipers did, but I wasn't a sniper, so that question may be best posed for, a guy who's on recce or something like that.
Yeah, you're talking about ATX and thermal sights.
Yeah, it must be a thermal sight. So I mean, if you're hog hunting and stuff like that, they're great. And NVGs can have some disadvantages, because you're kind of beholden still to ambient light, and your ability to see animals and things like that. So yeah, I mean, if you're out hunting, sure.
Yeah. We're getting a lot of questions. Usually we don't get this many questions, but I guess I guess people are taking advantage of this.
No, I know Jason Ogborn. Yeah, he's one of my local LE guys here. Got a favorite 5.56 round for use on two-legged animals that isn't special order only. Man, one of the 5.56 rounds that I recommend to guys, especially LE guys that are running SBRs, is the 50 grain TSX from Black Hills. That's their 5.56 optimized. And the reason I do that is because a lot of LE guys, especially in the SWAT community, are running really short barrels, which I don't recommend for a number of reasons. With ballistics, but I tend to see a lot better velocity with that round. And one of the interesting things, because I do a lot of data collection with my rifle courses, one of the things that I found with a variety of different barrels, and obviously everybody's rifle's different, and they all perform differently, but the 50 grain TSX is ballistically, trajectory-wise, a very close approximation of XM193. And not everybody has the funding to shoot duty ammo or hunting ammo or defense ammo nonstop for training. So having a training ammo that's somewhat matched to your duty rounds, is a pretty big advantage. So you don't have to change holds when you're training.
Yeah, we were talking one time about how people set their holds at like the wrong distances.
Yeah, and want to be careful how I explain that, because I think one of the problems with zeroing methodology is it's not explained to the students or who they're talking to properly.
When you explained it to me, it took you. It was a long conversation. I mean, we don't have the time. Or we're gonna be.
I've got an hour and a half video, explaining the drawbacks of standardized zeros, like your 50-200 or your 25-300, as opposed to a custom zero. And the thing is nobody out here in the industry is shooting standardized ammunition, standardized rifles, standardized optics. Everything's different, and 5.56 is not a standard. Like all these different flavors of 5.56, they're all different. So the ballistics are going to be different. And most of the rifles that I pulled data on, and set up zeros for, we've actually seen that it's mathematically impossible to have a true 25-300 or a true 50-200, unless you start shimming the optic up and down, to make that happen. It's not going to be possible. So you need to pull data. You need to backwards plan your zero, and use data to make a logical decision on what distance you want to zero at.
Why do you think so many people believe everything that they read on the internet about like zeroing stuff? It's like that commercial where I can't remember. It's for something where the guy, like, I'm a model. It's this big fat guy.
Dunning-Kruger, man. The Dunning-Kruger effect. You Google that. It's you're an expert within your realm of expertise. So your level of knowledge is based off of your level of exposure, right? So, guys like me that get out of the military, a lot of us think that, a 25-300 or a 50-200 is valid because that's what we know. And we've never taken the time to really delve into that to see what that looks like, or realize the differences between ammunition, barrel lengths, muzzle velocities, all that stuff. So until you've kind of been exposed to that level of information, you don't know what you don't know.
Right. We're gonna rattle off some of these questions here. Somebody wants to know your opinion on the 6.9 special.
I got no opinion, man. Like, I'm not a big gear whore, or chaser, the next best thing, so I don't kind of sit around and watch. There's all kinds of new flavors, of ammunition out here. I just kind of just sit back and look at it and see what's going to come out. For my applications, I don't see anything better than 5.56 right now for what guys are using. A lot of these other rounds that are out there are going to have a higher recoil impulse, which is going to affect your ability to apply follow-on shots. And 5.56, you can push that out to some pretty good distances, with some good fundamentals. If you're getting into long gunning or something like that, there's a lot of different rounds out there that are kind of coming on the market right now. 36-yard zero, that's a Marine Corps zero, man. What do I think about it? I mean, it's a standardized zero. And, unless you're shooting the standardized weapons that those zeros are designed for, it doesn't work, period. And I get that. It's one of my favorite things. Like, I'll do an hour and a half long video explaining the difference, where standardized zeros fall apart. And then I'll get a comment like, I use a 36-yard zero. I'm like, okay, how did you arrive at that? Did you pull velocity? Did you check the ballistics? Did you measure atmospherics? Did you count for everything to see if that actually works? Because you're only going to be zeroed at 36 yards. That's it. You're going to be zeroed at the distance you punch paper at. What happens beyond there is going to be dependent on the ballistics. And most people don't shoot well enough to validate a 0 at their secondary intersect or far intersect of their 0, right? They'll confirm, well, I hit a 36-inch gong, at 300 yards, I'm good. Well, that's a 36-inch margin of error, unless you went and sprayed it and saw your impacts dead center on it, and you're grouping acceptably on it.
So basically, Matt wants to know: are you like basically saying you zero your rifle and your ammo?
It's everything. You have to look at everything. So you've got to take your critical measurements, which is your height over bore is one of them. You need to some extent, you'll have to take into account your twist rate, for spin drift out at distance. You're going to have to measure muzzle velocity. You're going to have to measure atmospherics, what the density of that column of air that you're shooting through is.
What that's one thing
coefficient of the round is. How you true that up. There's a lot of different aspects in there, so you have to look at everything. It's not just the rifle and the ammo. It's also the weather, the atmospherics as well.
Well, if you shoot long distances, when you start shooting in the morning, you can have the same exact setup, but by mid-afternoon, your 0 is totally off.
Well, so for that, when you're shooting long distance, you're accounting for weather. So your 0 doesn't necessarily change. Your point of impact will change, but you should be accounting for weather because that's part of the math formula. Because we've gone away from data on previous engagements, and now it's data because the math and the science is there, to be able to get good predictive results. But that doesn't only apply for long distance shooting. For your tactical rifle, you increase your hit percentages at distances past your 0 distance, the one that you actually punch paper at, right? If you have a good knowledge of what that round is doing, your hit percentage goes up, right? And you want to be really careful accepting error in that data because, I tell students you could have a sub-minute of angle rifle, but as soon as you put your 6-minute of angle meat grippers on that rifle, and align it with your 4-minute of angle eyeballs, you're going to impart enough error on it that you're going to have to work through with fundamentals. So why accept error somewhere else? You're going to increase your hit percentages. Lab Radar, favorite chronograph, hands down. And I've messed around with a lot of them. I started, with like a regular shooting chrony, which, a lot of guys, do because it's cheap. You can get it at Bass Pro. And then I kind of moved to the gold standard at the time, which is the Ehler 35P, which is a proof chronograph. And that was really good. I was always paranoid about students, shooting the sky screens, and it's temperamental and lighting conditions and things like that. And when the Lab Radar came out, I'll wait a year, see how this thing does because I don't jump on bandwagons. Messed around with the magneto speed, and after I had a couple clients, shoot the blades on those things. Kind of moved away from that. Lab Radar, hands down. It's more expensive, but you lay it down, point it, start shooting. You get data, and it works in all lighting conditions, almost all weather. It's kind of a no-brainer.
Now, why do you think the SWAT guys run barrels that are too short sometimes? What is the definition of a barrel that's too short?
So I think, a lot of what I hear is the maneuverability of the gun. And I used to do CQB at the unit with a 14.5-inch barrel. A shorter barrel has good confined space applications, but I think a lot of guys really don't understand what they're giving up. You're giving up a lot of velocity, and I've run into, a lot of SWAT teams that are running 10-inch barrels and running Hornady tap, and they don't understand that they're, because of the reduced muzzle velocity, they're actually risking over penetration. A lot of the Hornady tap rounds that I've seen through these shorter barrels, they fall underneath the manufacturer's minimum expansion velocity threshold at 70 yards, which you can get 70 yards inside of some hotels, much less the schools in here in Texas, which are massive. And a lot of people don't understand that, rounds going slower will tend to over penetrate more than rounds going faster. So you've got to be really, really careful. And
Yeah, it's
kind
kind of
of look at that.
counterintuitive. Basically, the way that works is if it's going too slow, it won't expand and
Well, that's what
expand.
you need energy for, kinetic energy. You've got to have enough energy in the form of velocity to be able to overcome the molecular bonds of that round to get it to perform, to get it to expand, to get it to collapse, to get it to yaw, to do whatever it's designed to do terminally in bodies. And if you don't have enough energy, then it doesn't deform. So you're actually getting more pounds per square inch pressure because it didn't expand, didn't create that drag to decelerate, to use your opponent as your ballistic backstop, to get that round to put the brakes on, and it can zip right through.
Yeah, over penetration is a huge problem.
Yeah, and that knowledge feeds into the mental calculus, which, hey, that UPS shooting's a thing. It's not automatically I see threat, pull trigger. You've got to be the problem solver behind the trigger, and whether or not you shoot is mental calculus. There's a number of factors that go into there with whether or not that shot's appropriate and at what distance your round falls, underneath the expansion velocity threshold needs to fall into that. SWAT aren't typically going to be engaging outside of 25 yards, a shorter barrel. Okay, so goes tactical right off the bat. I mentioned that good video that I posted of that one officer.
He just joined.
Yeah. So he took a shot across traffic that was past 25 yards. So you got to be really careful assuming that you're always going to shoot underneath 25 yards because you don't get the deciding vote on how an engagement occurs, right? The enemy gets a vote in that. And if you're always going to be engaging inside of 25 yards, well, hey, why not just carry a pistol carbine? Why not do that?
Yeah.
So
Kurt's shoemaker says there are also short barrels have inconsistent shots due to the burn rate of the powder not consistently burning.
can be, it depends, because all powder formulations are different. They'll be tuned to have different spikes, and usually they'll have more than one pressure spike as the bullet travels down. So there's a lot of depends in there, So I think he's right, but I'd be careful categorically stating that because all rounds are, going to be different. They have different powder formulations behind them.
Okay, here's a question I have.
Mm-hmm.
Did you develop all this knowledge on ballistics in Delta, or was that after Delta?
At the unit. No, man. I kind of got smart. Had to get smart on that afterwards. The first civilian course I taught, I actually did kind of a free-ish tactical clinic. After I got back from the UAE, I kind of wanted to validate, some of the stuff out there. And one of the things I noticed is that everybody had a different rifle. They all had different barrel lengths, all different velocities. And I had a shooting crony with me, and I pulled data, on them. All the velocities were drastically different. And, my takeaway when I sat down and looked at all that data, I was like, yeah, man, we're going to have some problems here. So that's when I started getting into it.
Ghost was trying to say why they use shorter barrels. He wasn't trying to say that that was right or anything.
No, and I hear that too, and I tell those guys the exact same things that I said. Hey, enemy gets a vote. Most SWAT teams are supposed to be capable of performing hostage rescue or active shooter interdiction in large venues, right? Even a hotel, you get past a 25-yard shot. I live in Texas here. A lot of these high schools will have central access corridors that can be in excess of 200 yards. That's CQB. That was another article I did that got a little bit of pushback on the whole. CQB isn't a distance; it's a tactic. Because people have like a CQB 0 or whatever. But said enemy gets a vote in the distance that engagement happens in.
Are you going to be offering any classes outside Texas in 2020?
I've got classes outside of Texas, but they're hosted courses or private courses. I mean, if guys want to set some up out there, yeah, I'll teach wherever, so if you want a course in your local area, you can just hit me up and, we'll set one up.
Yeah. And Cowboy came in a little bit late. He wasn't referring to the show, the unit.
We just cringe every time we hear the D word, man. It's like, we just don't like using it. So yeah, I mean, we call our, the unit.
Yeah, Ghost Tactical. He actually trained with one of Sheriff Chris Brown. I think you and Chris Brown would get along great. Chris Brown is a no-nonsense sheriff. He's like, I'm not going to obey anything that violates the Constitution, which is cool. Chris Shoemake also reads Brian Litt's Applied Books.
Yeah. I've got his books right over here on the rack behind me, man. They're great. I've got them on my Amazon gear list. All the Brian Litt's books, the Applied Ballistics books, are really great resources, and they're one of the resources that I definitely dug into, to kind of get smart on things as well.
Yeah, he knows a lot about freaking.
Yeah,
I mean, the dude lives and breathes ballistics.
Yep, I use the software, the Applied Ballistics desktop, to do ballistics analysis at all my rifle courses. It's good stuff.
Oh, one of the things that I love about you is it was the most hilarious thing. You probably remember it. Remember that guy that was talking about gun control and was basically on my public page, and he was like, well, I was in the Army, so my opinion matters more. And
then so that's something that, when I made that post about the UPS shooting, I kind of led off with, like, man, I'm not going to qualify my comment with my background, because it doesn't matter. And, I have a real bone to pick with all these qualifiers to opinions, because we're all citizens. And, one of the things that I think is been a bad thing that's happened with, the LE community or the military community versus civilians, whichever we're talking about, is we've developed this attitude where civilians, if you don't have the experience in this, you don't get a say in it. Well, you could argue that to an extent with the military, right? Maybe. But not with the law enforcement crowd, man. We're all citizens. We all get one vote. You get the same vote as I do. So my background's irrelevant in this discussion. Whether or not you value my opinion more than somebody else's, that's fine. But my opinion isn't any more valid than yours, because you get the exact same vote that I do. And the thought that civilians don't have a right to oversight in what our elected officials do or our public servants do is ludicrous, and I think dangerous.
Yeah,
I think really, and it's a cop out for most civilians. Like, oh, I don't want to get into that because it's not my lane. No, buddy, that's your lane. If you're a U.S. citizen, it's damn sure your lane.
Yeah, what I thought was funny is you started arguing back with the guy a little bit, and he was like, I was in the Army, you have, and you just kept on going back, and I was just sitting there, it's like, the guy is trying to throw that he was like in the Army, a regular unit in the Army, without even, saying, well, what is your, without even taking consideration that you might have been in the Army too. But you never went to the point where you threw it into his face, hey, I was in the Army too, or whatnot.
And I don't like to do that, man. I like to have conversations based off of facts, fact base. And I'm the same way in classes. I'll never attempt to validate something I'm teaching based off of my background or credentials, because if I have to resort to doing that, then I don't understand the material enough to discuss it or teach it. That's a common cop out. Like, well, this is how we did it. Well, okay. Do you know the how or the why? Can you logically explain it? Because if it's valid, and you understand it fully, you should be able to logically explain it. And if something's valid, it should stand up to scrutiny.
Yeah, I've actually used you as a source in some of my articles, for
Geez.
from some of your explanations.
Yeah.
Like why I do stuff. Why I basically got rid of, like, I don't really do like a standard 0 anymore. And I wrote that in an article, and someone wrote, "Why don't you do a standard 0?" And I refer them to,
Because what's the standard rifle? What's the standard round? I hear like, well, you're shooting 5.56.
yeah.
I mean, if you haven't visited like Bass Pro or Cabela's and gone to like the 5.56 223 aisle and seen like all the different colors and flavors of stuff out there, there's not much standardization.
Yeah, it's not. Even if they read exactly the same, it's not. And not only that, you can buy a box of a brand of 5.56 and buy the same exact box like 2 years down the road, and it's gonna act differently.
The lots can absolutely change for sure.
Yeah. Somebody wants to know. Well, we don't have a lot of time left, so let's just like roll through some of these. Would you ever do a multi-day unit selection, a mock multi-day unit selection course?
No, I mean, number one, there's no way to really replicate, unit selection unless you got a month on your hands. But I have had guys, trying out for, SF or unit selection, come to some of my courses, like land nav fundamentals. I teach land nav, and I teach it the same way I was taught up there, and everything's fundamentals. It's all fundamentals. It's nothing fancy. And then past that, it's just not quitting.
What do you think about places? I'm not going to name any places, but they do like mock training like that. They're like, oh, well, we'll do like a mock field training.
So I mean, there's value in that. Like before I went to Ranger school, I had to go to the pre-Ranger course, at Fort Bragg for the 82nd, and that's just to weed people out and to teach them a little bit. So there's definitely some value in preparation for it. But if you're in the position to go to unit selection, the recruiters are going to give you a handbook. They're going to give you a training plan. As long as you apply yourself, you'll have the tools there for you. But other than that, you just focus on fundamentals and land nav.
Now, do they pick you out to try out for it, or do you have to go and speak to someone? What is the whole?
So I mean, there's prerequisites to be eligible, but generally, most guys in the Army know you'll once you hit a certain level of prerequisites, you'll get called to go to a briefing, or something like that, and then you can fill out a packet and see if you can get accepted to go. Because you have to be accepted to go to selection. You can't just say I'm going. Like your packet has to get approved, and you have to pass a PT test and a bunch of other stuff.
When you first got in the Army, did you want to go to selection right away, or is it something that you developed over time?
I just wanted to do something, just I think that with the military, with a lot of other things, you'll get out of it what you put into it. You can choose to stay where you are and be the best at what you're currently doing, or you can keep doing other things. I just kind of wanted to keep doing other things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That Matt Does Cowboys got a you selected it. That's a really good question. I think in the industry there's a lot of hero worship, and there's a lot of industry fandom, where they'll follow different cults of instructors or things like that. I would look at what value that person offers for what you're looking for. If a guy's never been in the military or in a tactical job where he was doing operations within that realm, then maybe they're not the best person to learn tactics from, maybe. But we used to bring in civilian instructors all the time, like Benny Cooley, probably one of the best rifle instructors out there, I think. We'd bring him in all the time, or John Voight, who unfortunately passed away. I think he's one of the best pistol guys out there. Latham, Barnhart, we used to bring all those guys in to and we'd look at what they were teaching, evaluate it, see if something we could apply and what you could take away. So I wouldn't be tied to worried about has a guy served or not. Look at what he's teaching, evaluate it. I don't think necessarily whether or not someone's been in the military or not is necessarily a pre-qualifier to whether or not you should train with them.
Yeah. A personal question of mine. How did you meet Steve? Because Steve seems to know everyone.
Oh, you talking about Steve Brignoli?
Yeah.
Man, I forget, man. I think I linked up with him somehow when I was in the UAE, and he hooked me up with a job here in Dallas, and then he's a networker. He knows everybody.
Like every time I'm looking for something, I'm like, oh, I need like for you. I was helping. They were trying to cast a TV show, which kind of got put on hiatus because of the whole Las Vegas shooting thing. I don't know if I ever told you that. Yeah, well, it got put on hiatus because of the Las Vegas shooting thing. But yeah, so I was like, I need highly qualified people who have done this, and Steve's like, okay, here, contact this guy. I'm like, all right. Like, that was simple.
Yeah, he knows people, man, for sure. He knows people for sure. Yeah. Chris, he asked what would it cost to do a 10 to 20 person. Number one, man, I try to limit all my courses to 12 people max, just because I think anything past that, and you kind of lose that individual feedback. There's some courses where I might go more, but it's because it's more team oriented, like maybe an intermediate CQB course where we're doing more, 4-man runs or things like that. But as far as the cost, I try to keep my costs pretty low. I'm not in this to get rich or anything,
Yeah, your cost.
I'm a horrible businessman.
Yeah,
but you just have to hit me up, and I'd look at the location, see what the expenses are.
Reenacttactical.com is your website.
Everything on there goes to me. Like you call the number on that website, and it rings right here. There's nobody else. It's just me.
John Voorhees wants to know: do you consider the militia a citizen military?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's codified in U.S. code. I mean, that was the intent of the framers. It's every able-bodied man, is or woman, is part of the militia. Period. I think militia gets kind of a derogatory term. Like, oh, those militia guys. But if you really believe in the foundations of the country, it's a pretty patriotic thought, that every able-bodied person, should be able to call up arms and defend the Constitution. Period.
What do you think of the bill that the Dems are pushing in Virginia that would outlaw any type of militia training?
Yeah, I was looking at that, and apparently that law's been on the books for a while, but they're rewording it a little bit to give it some more teeth. I've thought for a while, and a lot of my clients have thought for a while, that one of the untouched bastions of gun control is the training industry. And I've been waiting for them to kind of make a play at that. I think the writing's on the wall for it. But that's also one of the reasons, like, I don't maintain student rosters or anything like that. I think a while ago the NRA was trying to, because I'm an NRA instructor. Not that I teach their crap; it's garbage. Other than the Eddie the Eagle program, it's probably the one program that I agree with. The kids, if you see a gun, leave the room. Tell an adult, don't touch it. pretty good rule. But most of us will do the NRA instructor stuff to get the cheap insurance. And for a while there, the NRA was floating around forcing us to cough up name rosters for everyone that was going to our courses. Of course, the NRA was looking at it, I'm sure, for more people to send all their junk mail to. But like, yeah, you want me to send a registration of everyone I've trained, you can go pound sand,
Yeah. What watch are you wearing?
Man, this is an old Garmin Phoenix. I'm a bit more of a fan of that than the Apple Watch, night vision, and gives me the lume cycles, when sundown and sunup is going to be, and it's a good training watch.
Yeah, you can tell somebody was like did some shit when one of the features they look for on their watch is how it works with night vision.
Yeah, well, and the lume cycles, with the night courses I teach, like I want to know when the sun's going to rise, when it's going to set, what the moon cycle is going to be, and I can look real quick and have a look at it, to get an idea what the conditions are going to be.
The final question I have for you, because now I told you I keep it to about an hour, is
I'm not pressed for time, man. So whatever you got.
All right, now then I got several questions for you.
Yeah, it's already past my bedtime, so I wake up at, I wake up at like 2:30 in the morning, and I'm usually in bed by, 6:30.
Wow.
But I've got my my drinks and all that stuff, so, and tobacco, so I'm good to go.
Do you think that there's any hope of us to fight back against this gun control thing without it going?
Yeah. I mean, it just takes citizen involvement. Everybody focuses on the presidential election, which is the one office you don't directly elect, because the states elect the president. You elect that's how the electoral college works. People forgot civics, but they don't focus on the local level. People don't understand what elected official has the most control over your day-to-day life, what the most powerful elected position is. Your sheriff. And most people don't even know who their sheriff is. So getting involved at the local level and pushing back is really what it's going to take. And you're starting to see some of that in Virginia, with a lot of these sanctuary cities. So, do I think there's hope? Yeah. It just takes people to wake up, and not accept it and realize that you're not powerless as a civilian. You've got a lot of power. You just need to, get up, stand up, go to your city town council meetings, get your voice heard, because most of your city and town council meetings, it's just a fan club there for your mayor or town councilman most of the time. It's rare that you actually get opposing views that show up. Put pressure on them. They're politicians. They want to get reelected.
Yeah. Here is a situation I ran into not too long ago, about a week ago. I got an argument with a cop on another podcast because he was saying that he enforces red flag laws. And I said, I was like, dude, you took an oath to the Constitution. He was like, I took an oath to do a job. I'm like, to defend. And he's like, well, I got to think about myself. It's my job. I'm being paid to do that. I'm just doing a job. I don't have to agree with it, and I don't have to do it. And I was like, so I said, I was like, that's breaking your oath. He's like, don't tell me about breaking an oath. I was in the Army, and I said, and I pissed him off. I said, what, did you break your oath there too?
Well, and here's the thing. I think I agree with you. To some extent, I agree with the guy. He's got to put food on his table.
Yeah.
Trying to find another job after you've been a career law enforcement officer can be difficult. Where my bone to pick with that is, it shouldn't get to that point. I think it's a cop-out of the average everyday citizen to throw it on the cop to say you shouldn't be enforcing these laws. Well, I agree with that. If you took an oath to uphold the Constitution, but it shouldn't get to that because the normal voters shouldn't be allowing their elected officials to pass these laws to begin with. And apathy's what got us to that point.
Apathy definitely did.
We're a victim of our own success. Like we bitch about gas prices while we fill up our tanks. Instead of not, and putting economic pressure on it. We bitch about our property taxes or whatnot, but don't go to your city and town council meetings to voice your concerns about it. And then we expect the people that we've kind of put in these positions to enforce laws that we've allowed to be passed through our apathy, and call it their fault. And really it's our fault.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I think could cure a lot of apathy is, and with this country, and to see how good we have it, is for people to actually go and see a third world country. I've been in third world countries, and I know you've been in third world countries.
People don't know what poor is.
Yeah.
People in America don't know what poor is, and the thing is, you get to some of these countries, you go to Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, and you see people living in conditions that are just unbelievable, and they don't know they're poor. They're happy, and they're living their lives. They don't know that what they're living in is considered, poor or substandard or whatnot. Yeah, people don't understand.
Yeah, our poor is not their poor.
Mm-hmm.
Our poor is
first world problems.
Yeah, they're like, damn, people are rich over there.
Yeah,
and I think that is like one of the things that it just shocks me how people don't even look. I mean, with the internet now, you can look and see.
Well, and even with the internet, a lot of these people, I got a real good exposure to this when I was in the UAE because of all the labor force there, and we had a maid, at our villa there, and a lot of them have never seen a light switch.
Yeah,
never seen a light switch. It's different.
Yeah, it's Chris Shoemaker says everyone needs to realize that every individual voice can count.
Well, and also you can apply that peer pressure. You can apply that individual voice to motivate other people to get involved, whether they agree or disagree with you. The more people that are in that conversation and the more people that are in that active voting group, the better it's going to be. The more representative those laws and policies are going to be based off of what your population center wants.
Yeah. Do you think what happened in my state of Virginia was a wake-up call to other states like Texas and stuff?
Yeah, I used to live in Virginia. My dad retired out of the Air Force in Virginia, so we lived there for a while. Did most
where at?
Went to high school in Virginia. He retired. They still live in Yorktown.
Okay.
On
the opposite side of the state.
Yep.
For me.
Yep. Where you at? At Western?
I know Northern.
Okay.
Right outside DC.
Okay. Yeah.
Near Steve, if you know where Steve is.
Yeah, it's expensive up there.
Yeah, he's still right behind me. Yeah. So there's a movie I want you to watch. It's called Rocky Mountain Heist. It's from 2015. It's about the group that went into Colorado and pushed their gun control, and how they did it with Bloomberg-backed money.
Yeah.
And they said these are the groups, these are the people. And the next state they're going to target is Virginia, followed by Texas. This was back in 2015.
Well, they've got a good chance of pushing it in Texas.
Yeah.
Because I'll tell you, a lot of the old Republicans in Texas are pretty left-leaning, and I had a lot of preconceived notions about Texas before I moved here, not bashing Texas. I like Texas. It's a good state. We like where we are, but I spent most of my life in North Carolina, outside of Fort Bragg, and North Carolina has been an open carry state for a minute. Most of us, inside the waistband carry, like what? You do kind of relax concealed carry. You throw it on a belt holster and maybe hang your shirt over it, and nobody went crazy. And then I come to Texas, and I couldn't even carry my old Benchmade AFO, my auto knife. You could get arrested for printing. Meaning if you were carrying concealed and you could see the outline of your gun, you could be arrested for that. It's a lot of the Jim Crow era gun restrictive laws that are in the state, that happened after the Civil War, are pretty restrictive and still on the books. And one of the unique things about Texas, I found, is that Texas really is a nation in and of itself. They don't really pay attention to things that happen outside of the state. So like when we passed open carry here in Texas, just like when they passed concealed carry, everyone thought the streets are going to run red with blood. I'm like, like I think at the time, like 10 other states in the union had open carry already. I'm like, like 10 other states already had open carry, for a minute here, and nothing's happened. It's like, what? They did?
Virginia.
Yeah.
Down the street with an AR in your back and
Mhm.
A Glock on your head. That
Yeah.
might be changing soon, but
That's an interesting other aspect of the open carry. So like when I'm talking open carry, I'm talking about the legal open carry in Texas, which specifies open carry of pistols. Right.
Yeah.
But, I think with open carry of rifles, there's another interesting aspect of that, and I tell students, it's not the leftists that raise a big stink about it. It's the gun crowd. It's the Second Amendment crowd that notice that and bitch about it the most. If you see the internet shaming all the time of guys, open carrying pistols or rifles, and who's posting it? It's gun guys. It's not lefties. So we're kind of our own worst enemy in that. But if we think about that from a fundamentals application, and understand that the average concealed carry permit holder probably has very little training, very little. And then consider, are they going to be more accurate and competent with a rifle or with a tiny little snub-nosed pistol?
That is true.
You know?
Matt wants to know your thoughts on the constitutional carry movement.
You mean, do I believe in the Constitution?
The constitutional carry movement.
That's what I mean. Like constitutional carry, I'm against. I think it's dumb that people are pushing for laws for constitutional carry. What they should be doing is repealing laws that restricted your constitutional rights. I think to some extent when we pass laws, we're layering laws on top of bad laws that nullified the original law. That's what I don't get about it. But I think the constitutional carry movement's a good thing. I would prefer to see legislators either, try to nullify, federal restrictions or repeal laws that restricted their constitutional rights to begin with, which is what our founders intended. They didn't want a lot of legislation. That's why you had all those checks and balances. Like they made it as painfully possible to pass a law. Like they didn't want it easy to pass a law, but we tend to push for laws to be passed instead of laws to be repealed, which is what I'd prefer to see. And carry what you want, carry it how you want. It's supposed to be your constitutional right.
Yeah, I had a professor back in college who used to say that the U.S. government is dysfunctional, but it's dysfunctional by design.
Mm-hmm.
Because the founding fathers wanted it to be dysfunctional.
It's meant for gridlock. It's meant for that. They put impediments to pass laws and a lot of opportunities to nullify laws, declare them unconstitutional, to do a lot of different things. I think that's one good thing that's coming out of this whole impeachment garbage that's happening is laws aren't getting passed. Yeah, some of them need to get passed, but I think any time where Congress isn't passing laws is probably a good thing. If they pass a lot less laws, the country would be a better place.
Yeah, I was on Hank Strange show and we were talking about a while ago. I'm not sure if you watch Hank Strange show or not. Pretty big YouTuber, and we were talking about the
What's his
impeachment
name?
thing. Hank Strange. He had like 100,000 subscribers and stuff like that. But we were talking about the whole impeachment thing, and it's like that was the best thing for gun rights people. Because they were pushing gun rights, and Trump was kind of bending on gun rights, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Well, let's put it on hold and like try to impeach him." And all of a sudden it's like,
that's one of the things that I was real uneasy about Trump. I think he's doing a great job, but I mean, let's be honest, he's not a gun rights advocate. He never has been. I think if he didn't have his son there, barking in his ear, or you saw how quick he was on the bump stock, thing, which, hey man, we should probably encourage criminals to use bump stock and encourage them to use fully automatic weapons because they're going to be less accurate and they're going to run out of ammo sooner.
Yeah.
When they start figuring out that, hey, I can get more rounds on target with single stage triggers and well aimed shots, that's when we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah. One of the things that I just lost my train. Oh, bump stock. One of the good things is that Rob Olson, GOA lead counsel, he's also the lead counsel in the bump stock case. He argued in front of the Sixth Circuit Court today, and from what I've seen and what I've heard and what the testimony I read, I'm cautiously optimistic that this might get in the butt in the Sixth Circuit.
I like what GOA is doing. I also like what Firearm Policy Coalition's doing. They're doing what the NRA should have been doing, and they're just suing the crap out of the government. Just lawsuit after lawsuit, FOIA everything. File lawsuits. Force the courts to rule on things. Try to push things up to the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court's very hesitant to rule on Second Amendment issues. It's hard to get them to rule on stuff like that.
You do know I'm a director at GOA, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh wait, yeah. We are trying to fight on through lobbying and lawsuits.
I think lawsuits is the best thing, man. Try to, that's one of the constitutional avenues we have to appeal unconstitutional laws and regulations. Sue the government. And government's real quick to try to settle because they don't want those those case laws out there. You just keep pushing them and get the courts to rule on it.
Yeah,
it's why enforce them.
It's why DC didn't appeal the court ruling about concealed carry to the Supreme Court, because if they did and they would have lost, then every state would become shall issue. And every state would be a shall issue to every person in the country.
Yep.
So anyway, you get a concealed carry permit in any state, including
and I don't think the Supreme Court's looking forward to ruling on that kind of stuff because there's so many other issues that come into that beyond the Second Amendment. You also get into states' rights issues.
Yeah.
So it's a real complicated ball of wax for them to get involved in.
But what would have happened is if the Supreme Court would have either taken the case and ruled against it, or they said, we're not going to take it up.
Yeah.
The lower court's decision stands.
Yep. Which
they would have screwed it up for all the other gun grabbing states. So that is the actual reason why it's not like a secret or conjecture. That is the reason why they didn't appeal it.
Yeah. No, for sure.
They were open about it. They're like, yeah, we just don't want to take a chance on hurting other states.
Well, and that's why like a lot of local governments will drop charges like for civil forfeiture, and things like that because they don't want it to go to court to get challenged. They'll just drop the case, as opposed to pushing it.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah.
All right, man. I'm gonna let you go so you can. Wow, you're drinking energy drinks. Holy
I came prepared, man.
I'm sorry, man. I didn't know.
Oh, we're good to go. I'm fine.
Well, I guess you probably learned how not to sleep in the unit, not the TV show, Matt.
Oh man, I mean, being in the army, you find ways to sleep. You catch sleep where you can. It's not a big deal. I regularly, go without sleep, on weekends and courses, because a lot of my courses will have night components and things like that. So, it doesn't always go with my regular everyday schedule. The only reason I wake up so early is because it gives me uninterrupted office time, before my 6-year-old wakes up, start cooking breakfast, wife wakes up, and stuff like that. So no emails coming in, no phone calls, so I can play catch up, and get stuff done before you turn into a fireman, and start taking calls and emails and try to spend time with family and things like that.
All right. What is that? Is that a rippet?
No, a rain.
Rain.
Yep. Got something called coenzyme CoQ10. It's got electrolytes, which it's what plants need.
Yeah, I'm on a high electrolyte diet, which is salt.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm actually taking salt pills now.
Okay.
And
you on keto or something?
No. I'm having issues getting my blood pressure above 104.
Well, you just need to listen to more talk radio, man, and get your blood pressure up.
That's my blood pressure gets up. So yeah, so I have a tendency to drop down below to a point where like I lose consciousness. So
yeah, or watch the hearings. I've been watching the hearings.
yeah, what do you think of that?
It's so ridiculous, man. I mean, it's scary, is what it is. I was watching the hearing. I think it was yesterday, where they had Horowitz testifying, and what was pretty interesting, other than the political motivations, there was arguments between the left and the right on whether or not things were politically motivated. But across the board, both sides of the aisle were really alarmed at the FISA abuse. And, Horowitz pretty much came out and said, like, yeah, this is bad. And it's bad enough that they've now opened up an audit into all the past FISA hearings, because he even said that the evidence wasn't there definitely for the renewal of that FISA application.
Yeah,
and it was falsified. And he made the other comment that 98% of the FISA warrants were approved by the courts. So how many others are out there? It's just it's one of those tools that on paper sounded like a good thing if people used it properly. One of those things, with great power comes great responsibility. And man, it looks like the FBI failed on all counts with it. And it wasn't just the FBI; it was the intel apparatus and everything from. And Horowitz even said from top to bottom, it was a failure. He mentioned like 4 completely separate hand-picked teams all failed at this. And it kind of laid it out right. If they can do that to an elected official, what can they do to us?
Yeah,
that should scare the living crap out of everybody.
That's one of the things that scares me about red flag laws.
Mm-hmm.
Is if you look, 98% of the FISA warrants are approved, but also regular warrants, the regular search warrants and stuff are approved at a rate of 96%.
Yeah.
And if you look at red flag laws, they have a lesser burden of proof than those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, and also, those are all done in secret. So if not approved, you never hear about it.
Yeah.
And they're not. And another crazy things about red flag laws, which I think is just absolutely insane, is like the killing in Maryland where the guy was killed. For red flag hearings are automatically sealed.
Mm-hmm.
So we will never know what was in that court case unless the judge that issued it opens it up.
It's one of those feel good laws that I don't think had any real good basis for it to pass. Like any good evidence that was going to make a difference. It sounded good and it briefed well. But I mean, there's other processes that you can use. If you think a person is at risk, like, hey, you can get government involved. You can get cops come out and do a welfare check. Like you don't need to go in there and have a red flag law where now all of a sudden you got a SWAT team turning up to confiscate weapons. It's ridiculous. Then you combine it with really bad tactics that are being used. Especially with a lot of SWAT teams are wanting to hit stuff hard. And go in. It's usually a really, really bad idea, and it's we're due for a really bad day, is what it is. Whether it's a red flag law or a no-knock warrant or something like that, they're going to go up against the wrong opponent, and a lot of people are going to get hurt.
Well, that cop that I was arguing with, one of his examples of why, one of the examples he gave me was like, well, what happens if I go into Walmart and a guy says that, he has a gun and he says he's going to shoot all these imaginary people, we should be able to red flag law him.
I saw one of the comments. Clint's like, "Where's the white monster?" That was my pregame. before the podcast.
Yeah, and I was like, well, if somebody was waving a rifle around Walmart saying that they're going to shoot imaginary people, at that point, he's already breaking a law.
You're communicating a threat at that point. You should have a basis to get an actual warrant, and maybe do a mental health eval or something like that, but go through a normal legal process where there's due process, there's protection of rights. I think anytime we're sacrificing our personal individual rights for people just to feel good, that's a bad day. And I think a lot of it's gotten to the point, again, because of that apathy, because we're not engaged with our neighbors, we're not engaged with our family members, and we look to the government to do things that we should be doing, and being engaged and policing our communities.
Yeah, we really need to change that apathy around.
Yeah,
it's gonna be that's our biggest challenge.
Well, it's like when I was growing up, like neighborhood watches, that used to be a thing. You didn't have to pay like here. Our homeowners association pays for off-duty officers to come and check IDs at our pool. When I grew up, it was the parents that were the neighborhood watches. They'd keep watch on people. They'd make sure their communities were safe. It was a last resort, to have police come out and hold your hand and do things that you should be doing, and that's contributed to the position we put LE into this country, where they're stretched thin, they're underpaid, they're undertrained, they're undermanned,
and they're doing jobs they were never intended to do.
No, yeah, yep.
Which is another thing. And then they get like
demonized. When things go wrong. Granted, some of that's justified, like that UPS thing. Hey man, I'm. Does some of the blame lay on us as the citizen? Sure, but no.
Yeah, no. Well, yeah, there's what I always like to say is you got to look at every situation individually.
Yeah.
It's just like the what is it? Not the Chris Brown, the Mike Brown thing.
Mm-hmm.
where the officer's never going to be able to work in law enforcement.
Yeah.
And
Hey man, if somebody reached into my car window and you started kicking my butt and going for my gun, yeah, I'm legally I'm probably green lighted to shoot him at that point. And that's just a self-defense, situation. But yeah, that cop, yeah, it's pretty bad what happened to him.
Yeah, but and so he didn't deserve this. But then you have that one cop with the guy that was crawling on the floor.
Yeah, I made a post about that. That was one of those things when I saw it, like I got mad. I got really, really mad. Number one, bad tactics. They pretty much just set him up to get shot. And it's one of those things where if one of us had done that, and I think that's the bar that we need to have, because we're asking law enforcement to do a very dangerous job, and we're giving them authority to do certain things, but constitutionally, right? Do they have any more power to apply lethal force than we do? One of the big differences, that we have is they have the duty or the right to insert themselves, which could create the need for use of force. Whereas, depending on your state law, you may have to retreat. You may not be able to seek explanation, like in Texas, one of our laws. But what would happen to one of us had we done the same thing?
Yeah,
I think that's a good bar to look at things. And if your answer is I'd be in jail or I'd be on death row, then we'll probably need to have a conversation, about what's happening here.
Yeah, but my point is that we got to look at every situation individually. What you have is you have people that, especially about law enforcement, that either blame law enforcement for everything, or they clear them of everything.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at the actual situation, and I think that's actually that actually hurts us.
Yeah, and and a lot of people are hesitant to get into that conversation, like we talked about earlier, because they don't see it as being their lane because they don't have law enforcement experience. When not only do you have the right, you've got the duty to be involved in that conversation as a citizen. You should be having that conversation with your city council, your town council, your county officials, your sheriff, as to what those policies are, because you do have a say in it.
Yeah, we do. One of the things that I also wanted to ask you about is I just want to get your opinion on this. The board of directors in my county they're Democrats, basically, almost all Democrats. The sheriff is a Republican that got elected with 92% of the population.
Crazy how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. But he got 92% of the population voted for him.
Yeah.
The board is going to put together a resolution to try to disband the sheriff's department and replace it with the police department that would take over all the duties of the sheriff's department, and they would just get rid of the office.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I mean, obviously you have city police and you've got county police, and I think that's a pretty good check and balance, in local law enforcement and local government, because your county sheriff is a directly elected position. That's a political position. And your city police, they're appointed in most cases. So I think that's a pretty good check and balance, on things. And I think it's pretty dangerous that they'd want to disband them, although that's not something new. That's a common kind of leftist idea. Well, hey, we're not getting our way with the elections. Let's change it to where we're either not voting, or like the call to get rid of the electoral college, which would be a horrible idea. Let's just change how that works. That's bad news.
The electoral college is there to prevent the tyranny. How am I going to put this? The Electoral College is there to protect the minority from the tyranny of the majority.
It's also a brilliant check and balance for government, right? Because if you look at Congress, right, directly elected, correct? You directly elect those representatives. The Electoral College also ensures states' rights because the states are electing the president through the Electoral College. So I think you've got a really good kind of check and balance versus direct elections, your representative democracy, right? Versus states' rights, states appointing people. So you've got a really good check and balance, with that.
Yeah. What do you think of like states that are passing these laws that say that the electoral votes must go to the winner of the popular vote?
I think that should be up to the states. It's. I think if it's not something we've agreed to in the Constitution, right? Everything should be reserved for the states or for the lowest level. It's like the call for term limits in Congress. I'm against it. I'm against term limits for Congress because who is it for Texas to tell Virginia that if you guys want to elect your guy for 4 terms that you can't? That's your voters' voice. Why would we want to turn to the federal government telling states who they can elect and how many times? It should be up to the states. If the states want to do that and the voters support it, let them do it. That's the whole foundation of the country. We don't have to agree with everything that everybody says, but that's why you can vote with your feet or you can vote at the ballot box.
Do you? You probably have never been called a liberal before, but
definitely not been called a Republican either.
Yeah, you're. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but classical liberal. It's different from liberal.
Oh yeah. No. Traditional liberals are definitely quite a bit different than
there's actually a term. It's a political term, a classical liberal, which is power to the states. With the exception of what's enumerated in the Constitution, that the Constitution gives power. That's what a classical liberal believes in.
Yeah.
It's a term that goes back to the founding fathers.
Okay.
You have like the libertarians and you have the classical liberals.
Right.
There wasn't any the modern day liberals.
Okay.
So you seem more of a classical liberal guy.
Yeah, I try not to label myself. I think we, as a society, we get involved with labeling each other. I just treat the Constitution like the Bible. You might not agree with everything that's in there, but it's in there, and you need to try to understand what was written there through the lens of the time that it was written, and understand the intent. Like, we get fixed on these little solo issues by themselves, but you don't take a holistic approach or look at that whole organism that is our government, which is a very brilliant and complex organism.
Yeah,
and you make constitutionalist. Yeah,
well, that's a synonym for classical liberal.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not offended. If that's what it means, it's what it means.
Yeah, it was always classical liberal until the neoliberals came and adopted the term liberal.
Yeah,
and then back in like the 50s and 60s, actually, probably pushing back into like the late 20s, early 30s. They used constitutionalist instead because the term classical liberal was hijacked.
Yeah,
it's a little thing, but yeah, the sentiment, classical liberal, constitutionalist, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I think just a lot of people just don't take the time to understand, what our government really is, what it was formed on, what the Constitution really is. And I see that in the training industry, with trainers out there that refuse to train civilians, where things like CQB, like I teach CQB to civilians. Like, oh yeah, I'm not going to teach CQB to civilians. Like, why? They don't need to know that. What?
Yeah,
Really?
that was one of the things where I talked to you when I first talked to you. You told me that. I was like, that is so awesome that you will train people and the same thing, whether it's CQB or whatnot.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, I don't really restrict anything. Like I do a counter surveillance and threat detection course up in DC, which is like a little mini Tradecraft course, and things like that. Like I don't restrict anything.
I talked to you about that because it's just like when I was working for intelligence organizations, we had the way you described it. I was like, I've been through that. It's like that. I was like, really cool stuff.
Yeah, it's a cool place to do it. Doing dead drops out in front of the State Department, and stuff like that. It'd be kind of fun. But but I mean, it's some of those things. Like I'll talk to buddies, about like, man, you're teaching civilians that. I'm like, what the hell do you think the founders were doing? Like they were doing tradecraft. there was a lot of stuff going on. But I think we've gotten away from that and think stuff that's only the realm of military or only the realm of LE, and kind of forget the whole purpose of what the Second Amendment is, because we get sucked into the false framing of the argument that the left does, which is self-defense. Second Amendment has dick all to do with self-defense, like personal protection. Like if you probably went back in time and went to the Constitutional Convention and told the founders, like, hey, you probably ought to reword the Second Amendment and put in here that you have a right to self-defense, they'd probably look at you like you had a dick grown out of your forehead. Like, what are you talking about? You've got the right to defend yourself. It's a natural right. Our descendants couldn't possibly be that stupid that we'd have to put this into the Constitution.
Chris Shoemake wants to know if you do a night fighting class. Is it a night or a knife?
I do night vision, courses, if that's what he's asking about. Like I've got night vision operator, and a number of my courses will have optional, nighttime components to it. For the vast majority of them, most people don't avail themselves to the night portions because they're just too smoked, for it. But yeah. Clint. I know Clint. Yeah, he's the Secret Six. Washington Spy Ring is really interesting stuff going on. Really interesting.
Yeah, up in Long Island and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of Long Island.
It was a really interesting period show that I used to like watching called Turn, which is based off of Washington's Spy Ring.
Yeah.
Really really interesting show.
Brad Melsner did the Secret Six, Washington Secret Six. Okay. One thing, when you do your tradecraft classes, do people come back to you and they tell you that they're like that they're doing like the drive stepping through neighborhoods and stuff?
Do what? What's that?
Like, do people come back and like when they do like the counter surveillance classes, do they ever come back to you and say, even though that I really don't have a need to do it, I just started developing habits of driving, like stepping through neighborhoods,
Well, and it's not primarily for tradecraft. It's also counter surveillance and threat detection. It's part of tradecraft, but it also has practical applications to recognize, like, hey, do you have criminals watching you? Because a lot of criminal outfits, whether you're traveling abroad, will conduct certain levels of surveillance to identify if you're a target, where they're going to hit you.
Well, that's what I was trying to bring up.
Yeah, and it'll broaden your eyes. And like I'll cover things like transitional spaces, elevators, parking lots, things like that, travel safety, how to properly plan your trips, so you can kind of be proactive rather than reactive. So it's got a lot of dual, multi-purposes to that training and beyond.
Awareness too. Like looking for things that don't exactly add up that you probably wouldn't notice unless your
Yeah,
situation.
and how you sift and sort that, through by conducting surveillance detection routes, by eliminating possibilities of coincidence, by using distance, direction, demographic in your area, to create some separation, to reduce the possibilities of a chance occurrence, or more probability that that person is actually following you for whatever reason.
Yeah, the class that I took in State Department was it was about 2 weeks. How
Mhm.
long is the class that
3 days. It's
3 days?
3 days. Yeah. When I took it, we spent a couple weeks and did some practicals and stuff on it. But DC is a great area to do it because you've got a great metro system, so you can cover good distances. It's scenic, so you're traveling around, you're seeing some good sights because a good surveillance detection route, you should have planned stops, cover stops you're going to go to, that help you kind of open up your situational awareness a little bit, and you're getting to do little stops in cool areas, whether they be, Arlington, catching the 2 minute unknown soldier, changing the guard, or, Smithsonian, or, ducking in and out of the Spy Museum, or whatnot, so you get to see cool stuff. You're doing it in a nice area that's historic as well. And, DC is a really clean destination anyways. I always find it crazy, that people that travel the country, the first place they want to go to is New York, and Manhattan is just dirty and crowded. I'm not a big fan of it, but DC, is clean, it's scenic, it's easy to get around. It's actually not bad to drive in.
Yeah. I
Once you get through the Beltline, that is.
yeah, the belt. The beltway is insane sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grew up in this area, so I mean, I spent my elementary school field trips in DC. Free
Mhm.
elementary school, but that's where. I mean, plus that's where you probably actually see some of the actual tradecraft stuff going down.
Well, and that's the interesting thing, when you're conducting counter surveillance, some of your lanes in DC, because we used to do training up there too. Sometimes you'll pick up surveillance, and you don't know if it's official. Is this a U.S. entity? Is it a foreign entity? Man, you got no idea. So it can be really cool. You could actually pick up a surveillance detail while you're there, and not know the nature of it, just because you might have flagged them by a way you were acting, or you weren't as kind of natural with your cover stop, or you kind of looked interesting, they picked you up, and now all of a sudden you got someone following you, and you don't know why.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that was really funny is when I was doing my training, my fact training, we had to say, well, oh, well, yeah, I noticed I picked up someone, blah blah blah,
Mm-hmm.
and one of the guys was like, oh, I noticed this guy, blah blah blah, and they're like, that wasn't us.
Yeah.
they're,
Yeah.
like, they're like, that wasn't us. We don't know
Yeah.
who that was. That wasn't us, but you picked
That's
up someone.
It's happened to me doing training up there for sure.
Yeah,
Because we'd have other trainees, whether it be from the Secret Service, or you know FBI or other entities, that would practice, surveilling us and things like that. And sometimes it was them. Sometimes it was like, yeah, I saw that dude, but he wasn't with us.
yeah. Basically, that's what happened. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we saw that too, but we don't know who that was.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you didn't pick him up? They're like, no,
No. No.
we don't pick him up. It's not
Nope.
what
Mm-mm.
you don't want to start it and everything. It was just kind of interesting because this guy was sure, and he's like, yeah, you were followed, but it wasn't us. And the guy's
Yeah.
like, well, you let him follow us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's definitely a cool place to do that training at. I've thought about, doing it locally here in Dallas. Some people have asked me, but I don't think you get quite the experience in some of these metro areas that you do up there, and some of the other areas that you could do it in may be a little less permissive. Like I've got a closed course for some LA guys that I'm doing up in like North Chicago, I think, coming up next month, and that wouldn't be an area that I'd want to take civilians into, you know.
Yeah, well, another thing about DC is you can take out the person that stands. It makes it a little bit harder because if you go to like Dallas, right,
Mm-hmm.
and you see someone from some different culture that doesn't really fit there, that you wouldn't expect to see there, then it kind of makes it easier. But in DC, the culture is so diverse,
Oh yeah,
and
it's a melting pot, man. Like there's no normal up there for sure.
yeah, well, one of the things you do is don't like I don't want to go into too much, but you're looking like for things that don't stand out. Like
Mhm.
I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but let's
Well,
just
and
say,
a lot of it's open source, you know, which is why you don't. Whenever you're doing counter surveillance, you want to have a surveillance detection route where you're covering distance, where you're moving in different directions, where you're moving into different demographic areas, whether it be commercial, residential, things like that, where you're creating separation. Where if you see that same person multiple times in different areas, where it's not a logical route, now you're decreasing the chances of that being a coincidence, because you know the deal. If you've done that kind of training before, you start looking through smoke and mirrors. When you start looking for things, you'll see them. You'll start seeing coincidences that were always there, and you can get really paranoid.
yeah, that
Mm-hmm.
that is that is definite. But one of the things when I took the class after it for like a couple weeks after that, I was kind of freaking paranoid of
Mm-hmm.
seeing, you know,
Mm-hmm.
is that a coincidence? I noticed myself started doing stuff, which is kind of good. That
Yeah.
my personal life, I started doing
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and it like
Yeah,
yeah,
Matt Dust Cowboy had an interesting question with that. Is there a way to differentiate racial profiling versus criminal profiling? I mean, at least when I go through that kind of training, or I'm talking to LE, can you in a valid way racially profile? Sure, if the metrics for that area add up to it, maybe, but it's more behavior that you're looking for, rather than race, if that kind of makes sense. So race isn't necessarily a trigger or an indicator. You're looking more for behavior, access and placement. Do they have a reason to be there? Is it valid? That type of thing. So it's not necessarily a racial profiling when it comes to that.
yeah. Basically, what they tell you is if you see people over and over and over again,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
more you see them, the more of a chance that
Yeah,
they're
and does it look like they're there legitimately?
yeah.
Because if you're doing an SDR with cover stops built in there, the idea with your stops, that you're stopping to detect surveillance at, you want to look legitimate there, so it should be a legitimate purpose. Whether you go into a hardware store, magazine book stand, buy a magazine,
You don't
you
want to go
know.
into the gym in a full suit and start like bench pressing.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, behavior, not necessarily physical appearance, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or if they, it's. I would definitely recommend people doing that class if they get a chance because
Mm-hmm.
it opened my eyes when I did it for when I first date.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Of
and
the
it's got a lot of applications for like business travelers. You travel abroad and things like that. Especially if you're traveling abroad, you need to be aware of your surroundings. I remember traveling through Prague, through some of the train stations there. They'll have criminal gangs that are actively surveilling, looking for targets there, and if you don't have your eyes open and watching for certain patterns, you'll miss it, and you'll be that guy falling asleep, waiting for your train and getting your bag snatched, and not realize it happened.
yeah, yeah. They definitely look for people like with headphones on and stuff like that. Criminal gangs.
Yeah, disconnected, not paying attention. distracted, which that goes into the transitional space. Before you enter a transitional space, you make sure you're not distracted so that you can reacclimate yourself to that new space you're entering.
Yeah, it's one of the things that the first time I open carried, and I don't think anybody even noticed
Mm-mm.
because it's so oblivious.
Unless it's the gun crowd, and I think it's closet
Yeah.
homosexuality, to be honest.
What?
Not that I knock that, like, hey, you got the freedom to do it, but I mean, it's the same as critiquing, someone for how they look. What the hell do you care? What kind of gun I'm carrying or how I'm carrying it? Does that mean we're not going to take warm showers together? Or whatnot? Like, the hell do you care what I look like?
Okay, on that note, I'm gonna be going to bed now. I do want to thank you for coming on. If people can find you at Green Eye Tactical, I plan to go an hour, and we're already over 2 hours.
No worries, man. Anytime.
So it was great. I think a lot of people got a lot out of it. We covered a wide variety of topics, from different things to ballistics to your time in the unit to classes to situational awareness. And I think a lot of people came and went, but we have at least 10 people that
and
stayed.
and constitutional issues.
Constitutional issues. Yeah, I think it was great. Yeah, you should think about doing a podcast.
Time, man. I got all kinds of things I want to do. It's just juggling things,
Yeah. Yeah, greeneyetactical.com. Go ahead, check them out. Bring them to your state. Trust me, you will not regret it. He's one of the top trainers in the world, and I don't say that with any hesitation. He's the real deal.
And thanks. And if you guys are listening, get involved. Get involved with GOA. Get involved with firearms policy. Get involved with your local government.
You can actually get 25% off GOA at gunowners.org/black.
Look at that. You had the graphic ready to go. It's almost like it was planned.
Yeah, if you want to check out our Second Amendment sanctuary stuff, you can go to gunownersaction.org.
Yeah.
SASO. If you like these patches, I need your address so I can send you a care package. And I think I might have sent out. Sundays are bad for me doing shows, but I think I sent out all my constitutions. I usually include constitutions in every package I send out, but like these hoodies and patches and everything are just been so selling off the wall with the Jolly Roger with no quarter for tyrants thing that I don't have any. I think I might be out of constitutions, but yeah. And if you like these podcasts, support me at patreon.com/John Crump. We have a massive story that's going to break tomorrow with a leaked FBI document that I got my hands on.
Yeah, it's going to be juicy.
Yeah, it's going to be very juicy. That you can find that at Amaland. Dude, I'm not sending you a book. Dr. Miguel is sending you a book, but I'll check on it. Matt Death Cowboy. But yeah, that is it for tonight. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. It was a great show. I learned a lot. I'm sure everyone out there learned a lot of questions. But it was a fun time, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, man.
All right.
Stay safe. Have a good one.
Bye. My damn drop. There it is.
You've been watching Fireside Chats with John Crump, a Black Swan Media Group production. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Tune in every week for a conversation with the difference makers in the world.